All right. We are going to give it one more minute for people to get inside of the show. We're live on YouTube and Colorcast. If you guys are on YouTube Live, please drop your comments in the chat. I will put that in there now. Oops. All right, let's start the show. Welcome to another edition of Too Tall Sports with me, your host, Brett Lauren. Thank you for joining me tonight. Lots of stuff to talk about, and anything you would like to talk about, please drop it in the chat, whether it's on YouTube Live or on Colorcast. Be happy to debate, talk about any hot takes you have or cold takes. Definitely down for that. Give me all your takes. The chat is not working on Colorcast right now, so if you're on YouTube Live, you can drop the chat questions and comments in there. I'll give you the rundown here. We'll start a little bit with some college football. Obviously, Georgia losing to Alabama. Big win for Bama after their crazy win against Auburn that they had no business winning, but they ended up doing it anyway. So Alabama's the SEC champs. We'll get into that. Cincinnati was able to stay in the top four. We'll talk about that. Michigan getting a huge and much-needed win against Iowa to be the Big Ten champions. Notre Dame stays at number 5. Oklahoma State loses to Baylor in the Big 12 championship. All crazy scenarios here, but we have the final matchups, which we can get into in a little bit. Major League Baseball locked out. I haven't really had a chance to react to that yet. Nothing crazy. It's still early, so I think they'll get something done by the time the season rolls around. But, hey, you never know. These owners are pretty hard-headed, so not sure if they're going to come to an agreement. We'll talk about that. We'll do some NFL stuff. Talk about the Bears a little bit and how it's time for, I think the writing's on the wall for Matt Nagy. I think it's time for him to go. Big Ben, maybe his last season. He's kind of hinting at that. I mean, he probably needs to be. He's not this. He's kind of a shot fighter at this point. So not sure what we're going to get out of Big Ben the rest of the year. Kyler Murray is back. No problem for the Cardinals. Dolphins have been on a little bit of a run here. They won 5 straight. I'm still not a believer in Tua, but hey, he must be doing something right. So we'll talk about that. The Lions finally get a crazy win against the Minnesota Vikings. You know, this typical Vikings for you. You know, just man, tough loss for people in Minnesota, and huge win for the people of Detroit. So we can talk about that as well. What else do I have for you on the docket here? Tom Brady, when he has Rob Gronkowski, they are a different team, and he's a different quarterback. So we'll talk about some Bucs football also. We'll get into the Rams. You know, they do what they do to bad teams. This is what the Rams do. They beat bad teams. They don't beat good teams, but they beat bad teams. What's going on with Lamar Jackson? We'll get into that. They haven't, fewer than 20 points in 4 straight games. Not really sure what's going on there. Chargers got a big win against the Bengals. I don't understand both of those teams, man. They look so good some weeks. It's a week-to-week league with those guys. We'll talk about that. We can get into the Buffalo Bills just completely unable to stop the run when Mac Jones threw a total of 3 passes, ladies and gentlemen. 3 passes in an NFL game. Even Tim Tebow could throw more than 3 passes in an NFL game. Not very well, but he could do it. So we'll get into that a little bit. Dodgers 11, still waiting for some likes from you. Feel free to drop those in there as well. Let's see. The Oklahoma hiring Brent Venables. We'll talk about that. Brian Kelly has an apparently brand new Southern accent. We'll talk about that. Mario Cristobal going to Miami. That's their guy. He's a former Miami Hurricane player, so it kind of fits right in. Damian Lillard wants to play with Ben Simmons. I don't know why this hasn't happened yet, or a trade of some sort to get Dame to Philly. Not sure what they're waiting on there. Lakers are on right now against the Celtics. Both teams are, they're the crown jewels of the league in the history of the last 50, 60, 70 years. And the Lakers are 12-12 right now going into tonight. So I'm trying to give this team as much time as possible before I react. This is about, I guess, if you really think about it, where the Lakers should be with all new players outside of AD and LeBron and a couple pieces like THT. So I don't know. It's kind of weird. The Lakers are there. They just got to make the playoffs, honestly. Can they turn on that switch? I don't know. They're pretty old. So we can get into some Lakers basketball in a little while. But let's get back to college football. So like I mentioned at the top, big win for Bama. I was rooting so hard for them when they played Auburn in the Iron Bowl. And Auburn should have won that game. Let's be real. They just should have. They outplayed them the whole game. But they when you leak like that and you allow a team like Alabama to get second, third, fourth chances, they're going to take advantage. And they absolutely dominated Georgia, who hadn't given up. I've been talking about this, beating this drum with Georgia. They hadn't given up 17 points, or they haven't given up more than 17 points all year. I mean, they have been manhandling people. And for some reason, they just got absolutely annihilated by Nick Saban and Alabama's offense. And Bryce Young, this kid is going to be a star. I mean, I think he's only 6'1", 190. So he's a little small, a little slight in stature, but man, he's making all the throws. Obviously there's a lot of talent, as all Alabama quarterbacks have, a ton of talent on the outside and the great running backs. They have it all at Alabama, right? That's part of the deal. But he looks pretty damn good, this kid, Bryce Young. And he made Georgia look like a run-of-the-mill team, and they blew him out. It wasn't even close. So bad look for Georgia. You know what? I still like Georgia. I'm not going to overreact on one game. Nick Saban knows Kirby Smart really well. They coached together for years. I saw actually a funny stat. All of the top assistants with the 2015 Alabama team all have head coaching jobs now. So that tree, that's Mel Tucker, Napier, I want to say Kirby Smart. There are a couple other guys, too, that have jobs now in the NFL. Pretty crazy what the Saban coaching tree. And he always, except for one time, Jimbo Fisher early this year, he's 24-1 against his former assistant. So point is, Nick Saban knows his assistants. But I want to believe in Kirby Smart in Georgia, and I do think probably they can beat Alabama. Their team is too good. So the problem is they're using a backup quarterback in Stetson Bennett, who usually doesn't have to throw that much. They just run all over everybody. Their running game is insane. But Nick Saban's going to make that quarterback beat him. So we'll see how they do when we see them again. Cincinnati is going to play Alabama, obviously in the first matchup of the college football Final Four playoff. Georgia's going to get a hot Michigan team who just crushed Iowa to win the Big Ten championship. Now, Michigan is a very good team this year. I do think Georgia is still better than them, and that's why they are favored going into the matchup. So I just want to give you the numbers here. So Georgia is a 7.5-point favorite over Michigan. Cincinnati is a 14-point underdog to Alabama. That game could get ugly quickly. I haven't watched enough of Cincinnati. They don't get a lot of nationally televised big-time games, and I just haven't watched them at all. But I do want to see that matchup. I mean, you got to beat the best to be the best. So unlikely matchup there, but we'll see what happens with Cincinnati against Alabama. Some other big matchups. You had Notre Dame stays at number 5, which is where everybody pretty much thought they would be, and they get Oklahoma State. I think that's going to be a great matchup. Notre Dame's favored by 2.5. Oklahoma State lost a really close game to Baylor to lose the Big 12 championship. Props to Baylor there. But man, Notre Dame, I just never believe in them in big games. I'd like to lean toward Oklahoma State. That game is, where is that game? It's in Arizona, so no help for anybody. But yeah, I refuse to believe in Notre Dame in big games. So we'll see. Plus, they got their brand new coach. They might be hyped, and they might, without Brian Kelly, Notre Dame might be hyped to play. So I don't know. We'll see if we get a good Notre Dame team that shows up in prime time. So we talked about that game, Iowa, Kentucky. Ohio State's going to play Utah in the Rose Bowl. Always a great scene in Pasadena at the Rose Bowl. I think Ohio State should win pretty comfortably. yes, they lost to Michigan, but I still like Ohio State. I don't think Utah is that good. They beat Oregon in the championship. Maybe Oregon was overrated, but I like Ohio State to win at least by a touchdown. They're favored by 6.5. Then you get Baylor, Ole Miss. I think this will be a hell of a game. This is the Sugar Bowl, and you get the Lane Kiffin versus Baylor. This game is in New Orleans, and that's going to be, like I mentioned, the Sugar Bowl. Baylor's right now favored by 1.5 points. Now, obviously, it's a New Year's Day bowl, so we have a few weeks before the actual game. But, man, Baylor, I like Ole Miss, but I think Baylor is probably going to win this game, just my prediction. And they pulled out a big win against Oklahoma State. Should they have won? Maybe not, but they were inches away, and that's what matters. So, a lot of fun bowl games. I think there's some good matchups. It's actually not a bad bowl season coming up here. So we can talk about that if you guys want to jump on the chat. I know my Colorcast chat is not working right now, so I apologize for that. But if you're on YouTube Live, you can go ahead and check out the chat there. Let me shift to MLB real quick. There is a lockout in place. The collective bargaining agreement expired last week. I don't think this will be a long, dragged-out process, or at least I hope not. There were a lot of big contracts signed right before this. So it's kind of like, yeah, we know we're going to go into this, but we're still going to get our guys and make sure we're ready for the season. That makes me think it's probably not going to be a long lockout. But there are some things that the players want, man. They want these younger guys to have a little more control versus the team just literally owning you for 7 years until your free agent year. A lot of guys don't make it to year 7. Most of the guys that get called up aren't up very long. And if, 3 years or less, it's not you don't get, unless you're a real stud, you don't get to hang around that long in Major League Baseball. So I think the players, rightfully so, and, you got minor league guys getting paid peanuts, to show up to the field for 10 hours a day and no days off and crappy travel and all that stuff. So there's a lot of demands, and, the owners always have the upper hand. But, hey, if you want the product in the field, man, you got to pay up. So, as usual, I'm with the players, but the owners are the ones making the rules here. So, there's also that weird story about MLB using 2 different kinds of baseballs during the season. They're blaming it on COVID and a shortage, and they had to use some from last year during the COVID year. Some of them were juiced, some of them were not. Very strange, odd story about that. And you combine that with the lockout. MLB they can't afford more bad publicity. They're already, teetering on if they're worth watching anymore for a lot of people. They've lost a lot of fans over the years. The average age of a Major League Baseball fan is mid-50s. This is not a young person's game to watch. They have some young stars to try to build off of, but this is just not a young person's sport anymore. I don't know. It's just baseball they can't afford bad press anymore. So I don't think this lockout will be long. Back to the lockout situation. But, man, they're not hanging on by a thread. They're hanging on by a seam. Hey-o. Anyway, we'll see what happens to Major League Baseball. I'll shift to some NFL here. The Bears look terrible. Let's call it what it is. The Bears look very bad. Andy Dalton obviously isn't the guy. Justin Fields has been hurt. Matt Nagy's got to go. When you're known as a genius, semi-genius play caller, you become a slave to the play sheet. You always got to, come up with the best plays and the trick plays. It's like, dude, man, stop trying to trick people. Do the easy stuff. Do the easy stuff well. So the Bears just can't figure it out. Fields has already been hurt. And when you run and you move around a lot, you're going to get hit. And that's what happens. So hopefully Fields comes back healthy. But I don't think, drafting a rookie, I thought it would save Matt Nagy's job. He made it through Thanksgiving. So I don't think he makes it. I think before the end of the season, we may see the end of Matt Nagy in Chicago. Big Ben there's reports that he's hinted it's his last season. They can't really move the ball anymore. Now, don't get me wrong. There were some touchdown drops. Deontay Johnson had one. If you have him in fantasy, you might know that very well. There's been some bad drops for the Steelers, but Big Ben clearly isn't the same. He's not a top 15 quarterback anymore. They just don't have it anymore with him. There's no backup plan either. You watch this team when Mason Rudolph trots out there. That ain't the Steelers, okay? Najee Harris is a good back, but when you don't have a threat really to throw and stretch the field, they got Claypool, who's kind of a big name that doesn't really do much. They got guys, Deontay Johnson I mentioned. They got some guys. They're great at drafting receivers, but they can't move the ball. So I think this should be Big Ben's last year. I think the move, if you ask me, for Pittsburgh, if New Orleans doesn't get one of these dudes, I think Pittsburgh's got to go after Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers. If this is the last dance in Green Bay for Aaron Rodgers, it makes a lot of sense to go get him. If you're the Pittsburgh Steelers and you got talent everywhere, offense and defense, and you're missing the quarterback who can move the ball. If I'm the Steelers, man, I go get Aaron Rodgers. I don't care how you do it. I would definitely go get him. Kyler Murray comes back, no issues, no problems. Cardinals win again, easy. If they're right and they're healthy, him and Hopkins, I think the Cardinals, I know they lost to the Packers at home, but if AJ Green just turns around, that's a touchdown, they probably win that game. So Cardinals, Packers, Bucks are your top teams, rightfully so, in the NFC. I do like the Cardinals as long as they stay healthy. And Kyler Murray waited a couple weeks extra, but they went 2-1 without him with Colt McCoy. They don't need Kyler Murray, but he takes them to another level. So I like Arizona moving forward. I don't think they're going to win the Super Bowl or go to the Super Bowl, but they should get to an NFC Championship game if all the pieces are working the way they should. As most of you know, I am not a fan of Tua Tagovailoa, not the person. I don't know him at all, just as a quarterback. I don't see the special there. I don't see the it factor. However, I guess I got to eat crow today. They've won 5 straight. Well, whoever they played doesn't matter. 5 straight in the NFL is not easy to do. They started off terribly. They're a weird team, right? They lost 7 in a row, and now they've won 5 in a row. So a lot of people think Brian Flores is a good coach. He probably is. And they've turned around this ship here. So they're back in it. The AFC is completely wide open. They could sneak in, obviously, if they keep winning to a later playoff spot. I don't believe in them as a playoff contender per se, but hey, they're hot right now. So we'll see how they finish the rest of the season. Still not a believer in Tua. Maybe I just don't like the way he throws, or just the dink and dunk stuff, or the fact that he's small and, it doesn't really have the it factor. I don't know. I'm just not a Tua guy, but hey, maybe he'll prove me wrong. We got to get to one of my favorite listeners, his team, the Minnesota Vikings. Leave it up to the Vikings to lose to the only undefeated team. The only defeated team in the NFL. Leave it up to the Vikings for that. Big win in Detroit. They were kind of honoring the victims of that shooting that happened in that school outside of Detroit, I believe. So there was kind of some destiny involved there. Excuse me. But yeah, leave it up to the Vikings to mess it up at the end. Now, they did not have Dalvin Cook. I know that because he's on my fantasy team, and I lost in fantasy this week by 0.7 points. So not a happy camper this past weekend. But the Lions win. It's not Kirk Cousins' fault. I feel like he did what he had to do. I think he went 30 for 40. Like, he had a great game, a few touchdowns. Justin Jefferson went off. I think it's time for Mike Zimmer to start kicking the can here and get him out of there. If you can't motivate your team to beat a winless Lions team that was 0-10-1, you don't deserve to be there, man. I think we've had enough. He doesn't bring the juice. He doesn't bring the fire. It's time to get rid of Zimmer. They're just not getting better. The worst thing you could be in the NFL, or any sport for that matter, is a middle-of-the-road, mediocre team. You're not going to get a high draft pick. You're just good enough to maybe make the playoffs, but you don't. You're just in purgatory in the middle of the pack. That's the worst place to be in sports. So I think hopefully for the Vikings' sake, this could be the end of Zimmer. Jared Goff tried to throw an interception in the end zone like he always does, throw it to the other team. This was crazy. Dan Campbell, they go for it on 4th down on their own 25 with 4 minutes to go. They give up a touchdown to give up the lead. They tried to lose this game. And the Vikings let them go down and score. He's a Detroit hero for 1 week at least. So, man, the Lions needed somebody, and they went to Jared. There you go. Crazy game. I mentioned off the top, Brady and Gronk, when they're both playing and they're both healthy, the Bucs are very tough to beat. And Leonard Fournette is back on his game. Brady leads the league in passing touchdowns at 44 years old. It's insane. He does have a loaded roster / all-star team. Godwin had a career high 15 catches for 143 yards. But still ridiculous. I give Brady his props. They beat the Falcons. They're not a good team. Let's call it what it is. Brady owns them. at multiple locations. If you remember, 28-3, Brady owns the Falcons. So when Gronk's healthy, and they don't even have AB right now, but when Gronk's healthy, Tom Brady's a different quarterback. So they look really good. They're going to be obviously in it at the end. So another big win for the Bucs. Rams do what they always do against bad teams. They crush them, but they don't beat good teams. I think they're still 1-4 against over 500 teams. So anyone think Urban Meyer skipped his team flight back to hang out in LA to go out maybe on Sunday night? Definitely a possibility there. But anyway, I digress. Cooper Kupp is amazing still. Matthew Stafford's still forcing him the ball, but he's great. He's one of the best receivers in the league. Runs good routes, and he makes it happen after the catch as well. So and I guess you could call it an impressive win, but not really. They're playing Jacksonville, man. They're tanking. So yeah. Well, I mean, I think the Rams maybe sneak in the playoffs, but they're not going to make any noise. Trying to figure out what's going on with Lamar Jackson. They had a 2-point conversion chance at the end. Lamar missed the throw. Offensively, it hasn't been easy for them. I know they have a ton of injuries. They're down. They're like top 3 running backs already to start the season. But this is not the former MVP that we're used to seeing. I don't know if the league has figured out Lamar Jackson or not. I don't know if there's just so much film on him that people have seen the blueprint or watched other teams defend him and go, yeah, that's how you defend Lamar Jackson. But man, 4 straight games of less than 20 points. If you really think about it, outside of Mark Andrews and Marquise Brown, Hollywood Brown, they don't really have a lot of talent offensively. It's kind of the Lamar show, and he just kind of runs around and figures out how to make stuff happen. But he's not Mahomes. He's Lamar. So I know he's a former MVP, but he doesn't have that arm and that, I guess, awareness of pocket presence sometimes. I know he's great when he gets out in the open field and runs. He's unbelievable. But sometimes the arm strength just isn't there. I don't know if he's hurt or the league is just on them. So Ravens are struggling at the moment. Chargers got a big win. This is the typical Chargers. Even when Phillip Rivers was there, every week it's week to week with them. I expected them to lose this game. The Bengals came off a huge win against the Steelers where they put up 40 and just had a couple I think they had a pick 6. They dominated the Steelers last week. The Bengals did. And then they just laid an egg against the Chargers. So, I don't know. And the Chargers have a terrible run defense, and Joe Mixon's been awesome this year, and they couldn't do anything. I don't get it, man. I'm not sure. But Herbert's awesome, makes stuff happen, big arm. Keenan Allen had 2 touchdowns. So, if the Chargers can just be themselves, man, they'll make the playoffs, and they'll have a shot here. That game last night with Buffalo, they should have won that game. Honestly, they have so much more talent on probably on both sides of the ball. They have more, younger, stronger players on both sides of the ball. But this just goes to show you, man, if you know how to coach a good scheme, and I think Mac Jones said it. Josh McDaniels has like plan A, B, C, and D if he needs to. I mean, this Patriots team is well coached. They're disciplined, and they just don't make mistakes. And the other teams do. And like I mentioned at the top, Mac Jones threw a total of 3 passes. And the Patriots just ran down their throats in shitty weather. And, man, I just don't get it, the Buffalo Bills. There's so much talent there. And I don't know. You can't blame the defense. They only gave up 14 points, and most of it was field goals. So the Bills' offense, obviously they can't run it that well, and they're dependent on Josh Allen forcing it to Stephon Diggs. So I don't know. I wish the Bills fans better. And they're 7-5 now. They're teetering. Yeah, I mean, I know, like I said, the AFC is wide open, man, but Miami's streaking. You got some other teams that are on the rise. Kansas City's going to figure their stuff out. The Chargers, the Raiders are still in it. If you keep sliding like this, I don't know. Buffalo might have an early exit or not make the playoffs at all. A couple college football notes. Oklahoma gets their guy, Brent Venables. He was the defensive coordinator at Clemson. Probably the best coach they could have gotten at this point, honestly. All the big names are gone for the most part. So Oklahoma hires one of the top assistants in the country who used to be at Oklahoma before he went to Clemson, so he's familiar with the program. This is a good hire for Oklahoma, and they acted pretty quickly after all the big names went where they went. So good move by the Sooners to get a defensive mind in there, because we all know they don't stop anybody. So good move by Oklahoma there. Brian Kelly, if you saw that interview, that was kind of funny. He goes down, in case you didn't hear it, to an LSU basketball game, and they introduce him at halftime to make a speech, hype everybody up about the upcoming LSU football season, all the recruits are going to get, blah, blah, blah. And he kind of starts talking in a Southern accent like he's adopting the culture down there a little bit, coming a Northern guy. I think he's from Massachusetts, Boston, coached at Notre Dame. He hadn't been in the South coaching. And now he's down at LSU talking about my family, and it's a great time to be a Tiger. Like, what? Where's this come from? So kind of funny. But I guess he's really trying to adapt to the LSU culture down there in Louisiana. So should be interesting to see. I don't know if he's going to be as if his style is going to pop like Lincoln Riley's out at USC, which seems like more of a natural fit and an easier road, as you guys know, in the Pac-12 than the SEC. But LSU's got all the talent in the world down there. He won't have to go very far to recruit. So if he can do what he did at Notre Dame, you would think on paper he could do this at LSU with all the resources and athletes they have down there. So be interesting to see what happens with LSU and Brian Kelly. But I just thought it was funny with his newly found Southern accent. Mario Cristobal leaves Oregon to go to Miami. He's a Miami guy, so I think he'd fit there. He played for the U. This makes a lot of sense. He's going back home, knows the culture, knows the program, and knows the expectations. And he was in that era of when they were actually relevant and good and a top program in the country. So good move for Miami to get their guy down there at the U. And that leaves Oregon with a coaching opening there as well in Eugene. I don't think it makes sense. There's rumors about Chip Kelly going back. That doesn't make sense. I don't think the game's kind of passed him by, in my opinion. They need to get somebody newer, younger, who gets the current state of college football. I don't think Chip Kelly's right to go back there. He already had his time there. I don't see the point. Little NBA talk for you. Dame Lillard, all of a sudden there's a report he wants to play with Ben Simmons. I don't know why. I know he's a defender, but they're under 500 right now in Portland. They need a shakeup. They fired Terry Stotts last year. They brought in Chauncey Billups, former NBA player, to coach the team. They just fired the GM, Neil O'Shea, who's had some issues with sexual harassment and front office stuff behind the scenes. There's a lot of things happening in Portland right now. One of the things that's not happening is winning. How many times are they going to try this and go to the dance again with the same crew here? You got McCollum and Lillard and Nurkic. Clearly, it's not turning into anything, really. They went to one Western Conference Finals. That's it. So I think it's time to blow that team up, whether Dame has to leave or CJ McCollum has to leave. But I think it's time for a change there, whether Dame has to force himself out, which he should do. He's given that city a lot of years. He doesn't know them anything else other than a championship, but it's not happening. It's just not happening. All the other stars leave nowadays. No one's loyal anymore. You may have to just get with the times and leave. So I don't know if it makes sense. The natural fit for me, I know you said he might want to play with Ben Simmons, but I'd like to see him in Philadelphia playing with Embiid. I think that makes sense. Now you're a contender in the Eastern Conference. So I don't see the point of Dame staying in Portland, even if you get Ben Simmons. That's not a championship team either. So I just think it's time for everyone to move on in Portland and let them start over, man. Let them start over with some draft picks and stuff. So I do have thoughts on the Lakers. They're 12-12. I'm trying to give this team as much time as possible. They're just not very good. They're an average team, as their record shows. They can't stop anybody. They can't guard the three. They can't shoot the three. They're just very inconsistent. They're old. They're veterans. They're coasting through the season right now. I think they're just hoping to turn it on, and they'll be a 6 or 7 seed later on, whatever the case may be. But you can't just turn it on at 37 years old. I know LeBron's been invincible for the most part, but he's already missed, I think, most of the games, if not half the games this year already. So I'm waiting longer to give my full thoughts. Russ has been a little disappointing, but he plays every game like I predicted. So you kind of have to deal with the recklessness to get through the regular season. Now, hopefully he makes better decisions when it comes down to it if they make the playoffs. AD's having his worst shooting year ever. So a lot of problems with the Lakers right now. But, man, I hope they figure it out. So other LeBron teams have started 500 before. So this is a brand new group, and we'll see if they can put it all together. That's my show for this week. Nobody dropped any comments. Thank you for nothing. I appreciate that, but appreciate the likes on Colorcast. Thank you very much. Glad to have you guys in. So I will have another show next week, Tuesday night, Colorcast. I got a podcast this week with the CEO of Colorcast, believe it or not. So the platform that I'm using now, CEO of Colorcast, Evan Kirkham, is going to join me on the podcast. That will drop Thursday morning. Just type in Too Tall Sports Podcast. Find it wherever you get your podcast. And if you have any comments, questions, hit me up on Instagram at Too Tall Sports Podcast. Send me a DM if you want to chat there. But as always, thank you for listening to my Tuesday night live show. And hit me up anytime. And look out for the podcast on Thursday. Thank you, as always, to my listeners. And I'll see you guys soon.